Hi there. I did some research this week, and I actually spoke on it today about Jewish burial rituals and things like that. And I always wondered why those that went and peered into the tomb and things like that, they did not go fully in, and neither did they bother any of the clothing that was there. And I thought, well, what was that all about? After the resurrection is what I talked about. After that, they still were functioning in the law and thinking that touching something may make them unclean. They would then have to go get the Jewish rituals for cleansing, for touching something that a dead person had been in. But the Jewish burial ritual is one that you should go read about, because they put on white linen pants and things like that. Then they wrap you in a linen cloth, put, a white cloth over your face and things like that. But what's interesting, I read where one rabbi said that when you're buried in all white, that whatever on the great day of judgment is what they're thinking about, when every physical body will be raised back to life. And what they would do is he would put on white, and he said, we prefer white because in that time of when you're raised, if you're with the saints, then you're already dressed to be with the saints. You're in all white. If you're with the ain'ts, you still will stand out in a way because you're dressed in all white and not black. I thought that was interesting. But I utilized that information in my service because sometimes we approach Yeshua as a Christian, and Yeshua was not a Christian. He was a very Jewish man, and he was keeping all of the Jewish rituals. So Yeshua, when they saw him, he was still in the linen attire that he had, that he was buried in. Think about it. I had an auntie who prepared before she passed away. She was buried in a beautiful, and it looked almost vintage, but it was a replica of a vintage nightgown, and with a beautiful robe that went over, that came up about her neck, and it was so beautiful. And I would say, auntie, so you're going to be buried in pajamas? And she said, well, if I'm going to rest, I need to be prepared and dressed like I'm ready to rest. And I thought about that. She said, people put on suits and ties and all this. She said, I'm going to rest. As she dressed for the time in the spirit that she will be resting. But then I thought, when she raises up physically, she's going to have on that beautiful nightgown. Just saying. So those were some of the pieces I brought out today, talking about after the resurrection. Now, the women, on the other hand, again, I give my props to the women. They were ready to do the hard work. And generally in the Jewish community, the men do all the preparation for the body of the deceased, and the women do it for the women. In this case, because the men ran and were so afraid and were in hiding, the women, they were doing all of the work, all of the heavy lifting. So I guess I'm still shouting out women. They were ready to then put the herbs and things like that on the body. But they got there to do work, only to discover that the tomb was empty. But they were ready to do the work. And then the men, when they went and told them, they came back and they just looked on the inside. And then they went on back home. Just a little pinch of what I talked about today. Making people aware that after the resurrection, your perspective is everything. Your perspective is everything. And sometimes when we try to understand Yeshua outside of Yeshua's own community, therein lies the problem. When people try to understand African descendant people outside of their community, therein lies the problem. So I was speaking with my doctor this week, and I told her, no, don't give me that. Well, why not? This is the best medicine. In my community, 99.9% of African descendant people and non-African descendant people, they have told me, do not take that. And she said, but I've never seen any research or anything. Sometimes the community does its own research. So I'm telling you, as the community of faith, believers, do your own research. Sometimes, yes, we can scroll through and we'll hear wonderful things about certain scriptures and things like that. Know that that person is reading from the original language and they're not taking it out of context. Those things I've learned are very, very important. And when I was younger, I preached and spoke on things, missed it, totally didn't have a clue as to what God was talking about. So, go do that hard work. Look at some of the Jewish rituals as far as preparing the body and the burial. It's very interesting, and the insight of how they look at that part of transitioning and understanding that what's in your body is what makes your body holy. That image of God that's in you is what brings life to the body. It's when that image leaves the body to begin an ascension process, the body ceases to function. I hope this is blessing you. I know it blessed me doing the research and just gaining the knowledge of knowing. One thing you won't accuse Charlotte Pastor Caldwell of is not knowing my God. Know your God. Know your God's ways. Bye, guys.